Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Beauvais and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
All right, well, the first preseason game is in the books. The Bills fall to the New York Giants 34-25, a bit of an odd score in the National Football League. Welcome into It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, the first post-game edition of 2025. Matt Beauvais, Sal Capaccio. We didn't get a chance to come at you right after the game, but we appreciate you holding on this weekend. A Saturday night game gives us a chance to kind of digest it throughout the weekend, and there's plenty to digest here, Matt.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think with the preseason game, it's important not to overreact. I think that's the biggest takeaway from every preseason game going into the game. It's how many of your players got injured. Are you still relatively healthy? The Bills kind of got through the game without any significant injuries, especially to their key players. So I think that is, of course, the biggest win. And I want everybody to breathe a little bit. You know, sometimes we're on this podcast and sometimes we have takes that people don't agree with, or one of us is more negative than the other. Usually I'm pretty negative. There's no reason to be freaking out about a preseason game. Like after the game yesterday, I was with a bunch of my buddies and I was at a party and they're like, man, defense looked bad. And I'm like, guys, legitimately, you're thinking about the game more than they are thinking about the game, at least from a game plan standpoint. Were you in the press conference for McDermott after the game?
No, but literally just before we did this, I watched and I loved your question about game planning and his answer. I was going to bring that up because that was really a great question by you and really an interesting answer from him.
Yeah, I loved the answer from him. So the question that I asked him was because I feel like this is I feel like this is a good starting point because I think this is an important thing to get out of the way.
By the way, I wasn't in the press conference room because I left the stadium. I want people to know I was doing my job. I go in the locker room after. We carry Sean McDermott live on WGR, so there's no reason for me to be there. So I go in and we do double duty. I go in the locker room. I just want to make sure people knew I didn't bowl.
Maximize the amount of stuff that you can get.
There you go.
I asked McDermott after the game on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being we don't game plan at all, and 10 being all we do is game plan for these games. How much do they game plan for a preseason game? And he said somewhere between 0 and 1.
You didn't even give him an option of 0.
I didn't even give him an option of 0, and he went lower than what I even originally told him.
And what's funny is he said he started off by, well, it depends on which phase, offense, defense. Like I'm expecting, you could get like a 3 or 4 on either side of the ball. He's like, somewhere between 0 and 1.
Yeah, exactly. 0 and 1. And he went on to say, which I thought was very interesting, that it's almost intentional because he just wants to see how the players react without knowing exactly what they are supposed to be accomplishing. And I think that's a really interesting kind of perspective on the preseason as a whole. Now, he did go on to say that will change a little bit as we get further into the preseason, because now we want to see what we can put onto their plate, what we can address, what we can adjust. I just think this is an important reminder to have in the back of our heads of, okay, they still can't stop a screen pass. Well, some of that would be fixed by game planning. 3rd and long still killed them. Well, some of that would be fixed by game planning. And also, by the way, their starters on defense did only play 2 series, and then even in those series, they were without their starting safeties. They were without Terrell Bernard. They were rotating Joey Bosa and Greg Rousseau on and off the field. So it's just, there's little things to remember, because last year we watched the Bills get punched in the mouth by the Bears in the preseason.
Yes.
Bears looked like a juggernaut, and the Bills looked like a disaster. The Bills went to the AFC Championship, and the Bears fired their head coach.
Do you remember? Excuse me. Do you remember in that game that it was clear the Bears had, like, they game planned, like, to your point, right? I think they run hard knocks. They had Caleb Williams. They wanted to make sure he got off to a good start, wanted to feel comfortable. I don't think the Giants necessarily game planned, but I do think it was intentional. They threw some screen passes and game planned that. And that was an area where the Bills got hurt. So everybody's a little bit different, especially when you have a young quarterback like Jackson Dart. For the Giants, you do want to give him a little comfortability, I think, to make sure he knows what's happening when he goes out there. That's from the Giants side. That was really interesting from Sean McDermott and what he said right there. I'll read you a text I got. This is from Jess. Shout out to Jess. He actually was on the group in Italy that went to Italy with me. And Jess asked, he said, Sal, is there concern with the inability to stop 3rd downs and longs or defending screen passes? Like, he's already getting there. And look, those are things that, sure, to answer Jess or anybody, sure, like you want to clean that up, and you saw it last year, so it's right top of mind. But I agree with what you're saying, Matt, which is you're not game planning for that. You don't have something in the bag right now to make sure you're watching for keys and how all of that's going to work. All right.
Mhm.
We'll get into the specific players. Let's start though with James Cook, because he warmed up. He was in uniform. He warmed up. He did not play. After the game, in the press conference with Sean McDermott, Sean said he had a very good conversation with James. He said he wanted him to play. And because of James's situation, he did not play. I just find it interesting. It's getting to a point now where it feels to me like Sean McDermott, I mean, he's telling us here, like, I want the guy in the field. I want him to play.
Yeah.
We're having these conversations, and this is starting to bubble up a little bit now, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the right way of putting it. If there was a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not serious, I don't know. I'm going back to the scale thing that I just talked about. But, this is starting to get closer to like, okay, there's reason to be concerned here. I don't think it's going to go into the season, though. And the fact that he came out and did the warm up, to me, is at least a positive sign. There's more positive there than negative there, in my opinion, just because he agreed to come out there. He even took a rep during 11-on-11 warmups with the first team offense. So it's not like he was doing nothing and he just put the clothes on. Like, he still was actually out there doing a little bit of work. The fact that he didn't want to play in the game, I guess I understand his standpoint that he's still hoping for a new contract. It's just very weird to me. I don't love how this is being handled by his side. Just feels like it's a little bit sporadic and all over the place.
I still feel, and I think you agree with me, this is more agent driven than anything.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
It's not personal with James Cook. It's not like James Cook doesn't want to be with his team or be out there, which I think is kind of proven here by the fact that he did warm up. He was out there with his team. I think James Cook wants to do everything right by his teammates, wants to do everything right by his coaches and his organization, but he also has representatives saying, this is the playbook. This is how you do it. This is how you get paid. There is a business aspect to this, no doubt about it. We'll see where it goes, but it also dovetails into also something else Sean McDermott said, which he was referring more to the injured players, but I do think that James is in this bucket. And what he said was, I'm excited to see who's coming back this week, like what guys we get back, what they do. He made reference to like, okay, it's time now to start doing this. So I think when we get back to practice on Tuesday, I think, right? Tuesday will be the first time for the media. It's going to be really interesting because we're going to be really on the lookout for who's returning to practice. And I think Sean McDermott's kind of making it clear here. Look, like, it's time to get healthy and get out there. Nobody's going to be put out there at risk. That's not what he's saying, but it's time to make sure you're getting your bodies right so we can start preparing.
The two most notable names that I think we're talking about, Cole Bishop and Curtis Samuel.
Yep.
I think both of those players who participated in warm-ups before the game yesterday are players who we need to see back out on the practice field on Tuesday. They're also players who probably need to get up to speed relatively quick, because I think those are guys we need to see in game action when they play the Bears on Sunday night, just because those are players who still have a lot to prove. Cole Bishop has to prove that he's willing, and well, not willing, of course he's willing. He is able to be the starting safety on this team. Because yesterday, as you're watching the game, Cam Lewis looked pretty good. Hey, look, Cam Lewis can play multiple positions. I still think you need more out of the safety position. And then DeMar Hamlin, there were some probably moments. And once again, you're not nitpicking the actual game because there's not much game plan. But there was also a play, the play where TJ Sanders blows up his matchup and then Jackson Dart hits whoever for the touchdown over Dane Jackson. Like, DeMar's just kind of like watching it in the air and like not going over towards the pylon to like try and make more of the, make it more difficult of a throw or potentially break it up or something. So it's like, oh, you'd like to see a little bit more speed and athleticism on that play.
There was a question there on the radio broadcast, and you have the benefit if you've watched it. I went back and watched a little bit today, but Eric Wood was wondering, like, we didn't know. This is one of those things where we didn't know. Is DeMar supposed to help over the top there? Is his assignment something different over the middle?
Yeah, and
it's a valid question. We don't know that.
It's a valid question. We don't know that. They need more out of their safety position in general. So Cole Bishop coming back should be a good thing. And then Curtis Samuel is not a guarantee to make this roster. The money with Curtis Samuel makes it a lot tougher to get rid of him, but he has just not been on the field. I think he only practiced once or twice in Rochester before the injury popped up, and then he hasn't played since then. And a player we'll talk about later, Tyrell Shavers, has done everything he can to make the roster.
Once again, right.
Once again. So they're going to be
including, by the way, getting hurt in camp that looked pretty serious and getting
coming
back like 3 days later.
That's what I mean. And they love that kind of stuff.
Yes.
The availability and all of these things. So Curtis Samuel needs to come back and have a strong performance or strong performances, whether that's in practice or in the preseason games, to show he's worthy of a roster spot.
You brought up DeMar. I want to ask you a question. I do my arrow up, arrow down column after every game. I did one for this game. And I always try to tell people when you're watching at home, you have such the benefit that I don't have. I have a great perspective on the field, yes, but I can't see replays where someone maybe screwed up that I didn't see in live action or anything like that. Like there's a lot more time to digest. Everything's going quickly. I'm looking for injuries, things like that. So my observations are kind of off the cuff, kind of what I saw on the field, looking at the box score as well, kind of matching that all up. When I did it after the game, I had several people say, I can't believe you didn't give DeMar Hamlin an arrow down. Now, that's one play where I'm not sure what his responsibility was. There was another play down the sidelines where he took a bad angle. No doubt about it.
Yeah, you got put
I also saw him make a couple other plays where he was in the mix. He made a really nice play and stop at the line of scrimmage. Am I wrong here? Did DeMar just from what people are telling me, oh my God, you should have had him. He was terrible. Or is that just DeMar Hamlin bias from a lot of fans?
I don't know if it's DeMar Hamlin bias, but I don't think it was one of the biggest takeaways from the game. We just happened to be kind of talking about Cole Bishop, so I naturally went to that. For perspective, I did 7 players who stood out after the game as well. Well, it was actually like 10 players that stood out, and that's what I posted, and none of them were about DeMar Hamlin. So I don't think it was an egregious mistake or oversight to not include
when you
DeMar
say stand
Hamlin.
out, do you say stand out
good or bad
or negative? Okay,
both.
Okay,
exactly.
So we're on the same boat. We're in the same wavelength. Whereas, yeah, maybe there were plays that you could look and go back and say, okay, like he wasn't good there, but it wasn't like anything. I'll use your word, egregious, where I thought, oh my God, I got to put him on this list.
No, I don't think so. I think that some of the players that stood out for the wrong reasons, and it's not necessarily like I didn't think anybody had a really, really bad day or really, really like killed their chances in making the 53-man roster or anything like that. You know, some of it was the quarterback play. I thought there was some good, but there was also some bad. I didn't love that. Same thing with Tre'Davious White. Like they targeted Trey kind of a lot. One play he stumbled. One play he missed an open field tackle. He made an open field tackle on another play. So like that was a little bit of inconsistent, maybe a tad closer to bad than it was to good. So something to keep an eye on with him. Yeah, but there was nobody in the game who I was just like, ooh, that was a really bad outing for them.
The only player that I really thought watching live and box score wise that I said, you know what, like I didn't love his game was Landon Jackson.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I
thought Landon Jackson just didn't factor. By the way, he did not factor it at all on the score sheet, on the stat sheet, and it kind of matched up. And I think what really brought him over the top was he had an offsides to negate an interception from his fellow rookie draft class member, Jordan Hancock.
Yeah, and Jordan Hancock actually had a pretty good game. He was a player that seemed like he was all over the field. Now, it's important to remember the perspective of competition, and Jordan Hancock was playing well into the game, so he was playing against 3rd and 4th string players, so you would like to see him shine in that role. But I liked what we saw out of Jordan Hancock, especially with the position flexibility of knowing he could play safety and he could play nickel cornerback, so there's some good things there. Like I said kind of a little bit ago, preseason games aren't insignificant because they matter to the individual players. It's just the plan of attack for a team as a whole is what you always kind of need to temper the expectations and the reactions based off of. So I feel like this is a natural way of kind of segueing into which players did stand out to us, which players did we like, which players did we think improved their chances at either making the roster or having a more significant role on the roster. So we talked about a couple guys already. Is there anybody who immediately jumps out to you?
To improve their chances to make the roster?
Or just to be more featured in the roster or have a better chance of getting on the field?
I don't know about that right now. I'm going to go to a guy that I just think that really helped his cause, Laviska Shenault.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think Laviska Shenault helped his cause in the return game as a receiver. I think Laviska Shenault was kind of an afterthought here, especially after he hadn't been at camp for a little while. We've been talking about the return game, and I'm the number one, Brandon Codrington truther here, no doubt. And I've been telling everybody, and I still think he's making the team as the punt returner, but I do give space now for maybe the fact that they gave Shenault a punt return tells me there is a possibility that maybe he could kind of squeeze in and they say Codrington doesn't do enough for us on defense, Chenault can help us on offense.
Yeah, I like that one. I think that's a good one. I'm going to go with a pair of rookie defensive linemen who both flashed throughout the game with TJ Sanders and Deanne Walker. I was really impressed with TJ Sanders on a couple reps that he had. He was just winning. And I think that that's really good to see from somebody that young. One of them didn't matter because that was the touchdown pass from Jackson Dart, but he got there immediately and won his battle. And then a couple plays later in a different drive in that same quarter, Deion Walker won his battle at the line, batted down a pass. Like his size is just so noticeable, even in game action, which is good. So I liked what we saw from both of those guys. I thought that was impressive. We, of course, talked about Tyrell Shavers a little bit earlier. I think that's a good thing. I think I think he makes the team. Is that crazy?
Okay, so then it comes down to, okay, here's a guy. Let's talk about Elijah Moore. He didn't
have a catch. Didn't have a catch.
I mean, but is that because it just didn't happen, or have we been overvaluing his potential spot on this team?
Well, Elijah Moore, once again, this is not something on the sideline because the perspective you would immediately notice, but on the 3rd and 15 on the Bills' first offensive drive, it looked like he was wide open. And Trubisky checked it down to Kincaid for a 10-yard gain that had no chance of going for a first down. And the day for Elijah Moore is completely different if he has a huge catch up the middle on the first drive with the starters. So when the Bills are going through all of the film these next couple days and looking at what they saw, do you knock Elijah Moore for not getting the ball thrown to him, even though he probably would have had a huge gain? Probably not.
The question a coach is going to ask is, did he win his rep? Did he do what he was supposed to do individually on that play? And if it's a resounding yes, that's a huge in his favor, obviously.
It's more likely to me that they cut Elijah Moore than Curtis Samuel because of the money.
100%, I agree.
Because of the money tied to it. What they need to figure out is if they're going to keep 5 or 6 wide receivers, is Curtis Samuel healthy? Because if Curtis Samuel isn't healthy, you could get creative with some sort of like IR thing, and then you could have, him on IR, and then you could have Tyrell Shavers on the roster, and then when he comes back, you could figure it out and do a little bit of gymnastics. But I just feel like Shavers brings them a little bit of something that their other kind of middle guys don't. Like, there were similarities in Shakir's game and Elijah Moore's game and Curtis Samuel's game. And I don't want to put them all in one bucket because they're still different players. But Shavers isn't really like anybody. I guess a little bit like Palmer and a little bit like Coleman. But it just feels like every time they need him, he does something good, which is a good thing.
I agree. He touched the ball again, a 58-yard catch. And unfortunately, is with 4 seconds left in the half, or they would have probably, they would have had a chance to score a touchdown. So
I got a problem with that, by the way.
Okay, let's talk about it.
He caught the ball and touched the ground with 7 seconds left. The Bills called the timeout. 3 more seconds ran off the clock. 4 seconds left. I wish they would have either put up a stink about that or somebody would have buzzed down and added some time so they could have had one more rep in the red zone to potentially try and, get a touchdown. And I don't even care about this play from the result of it. I just would have liked to see another red zone rep from the 4-yard line with Mitch Trubisky and still some of those guys on offense, because it's a free. I mean, if you have 7 seconds, you have enough time for legitimately a free play. And then if it's an incomplete pass, you go out there, you kick the field goal, and the half is done. So it's the preseason. I don't think they're paying a ton of attention to it, but that timeout was taken right when he hit the ground. And I posted a screenshot where there were 7 seconds on the ground. So now I'm wondering, why didn't they have those extra 3 seconds? It's a very minor thing.
So, no, it's a good point. It's a good question. I didn't realize that. What I actually thought at the time was you could run a very quick slant that would take less than 4 seconds.
Yes. Yeah.
And even if there's only 4 seconds, I think you can just throw shotgun slant. That's not going to take 4 seconds unless something crazy happens. And then you still have 1 second left or you're scoring a touchdown, but you do have that one rep, which is important. But the Bills might have also felt there was an important enough rep for the field goal kicker to come in to make sure they have that operation, because Tyler Bass is obviously hurt. We'll get to Ray Davis in a minute. But that's also important to Sean McDermott, because Tyler Bass is hurt, to make sure that they can get that extra rep in for Caden Davis and for Brad Robbins holding and how all of that goes. It's preseason. Yes. What sometimes people say, Matt, well, it's preseason. Who cares? Just go for it here and let it hang out. Well, actually, what the coaches think is it's preseason is a chance to button up a couple things and make sure we're good in a couple areas. That might have been something the Bills said, look, I don't want to risk an incompletion, and then we don't get the field goal off. That said, the field goal took 2 seconds. How was that possible?
Yeah, it's crazy because then they still had to kick it off and then, and then they took a penalty and then it was like going to be, oh my gosh, they're going to do another play. So that was something that bothered me, but that was just like a very minute little detail. Some of the other notes I had from the game, we talked about
the screenshot here. Can I put it up?
Yeah, you can put it up. I literally just put it in there just so you could show it. Oh, you won't see it.
Let me get out of here. Let me hold on 1 second. There we go.
Yeah, see? 7 seconds.
Okay.
So it's like
he is down 7 seconds, 4 seconds comes off. So I guess it takes time to get the relay, to the official, whoever's calling it. Yeah. I mean, I understand what you're saying for sure.
I mean, I would imagine that Sean is on the sideline calling a timeout the minute that like Shavers makes the catch. He's running down the sideline and just doing this.
Yes.
So like conceivably, even if it was 6 seconds, you would have had time to do a play and that would have been nice. So we talked about Trey White, which I think was a so-so day for him. Talked a little bit about TJ.
Yeah, sorry, I want to go back to Trey White, and I didn't touch on it enough from my standpoint. Real quick, that was another guy. A lot of people said, "Oh, he didn't like his game. Give him an arrow down." I mean, he had a couple catches against him, but he made a couple tackles. One time, he kind of got pushed around after the catch. That's a bigger guy. He's trying to tackle. Yeah. I didn't think Tre'Davious White was terrible by any stretch.
No,
I mean, he had a couple catches on very, very quick throws in front of him. That's going to happen as a corner.
Yeah, definitely. One of them was a missed tackle to his side of the field. I think he gave up 5 yards after contact to Tyrone Tracy on a short pass that led to a 4th and short. It was the first series of the game. And then they got a first down the next play. So how different is the perspective of all of this if he makes that tackle and it's 4th and 6 and they force a punt? They don't give up any points because their starters gave up 3 points on defense. So how different are we talking about this game if they didn't give up any points as their starters and they make that tackle? Maybe a little bit differently because you're like, okay, the starters did what they needed to do. So it was a so-so day, a not so-so day for a starter. Even though it was only a couple snaps, Matt Milano looked awesome because he has looked awesome all summer. The first Giants play of the game, Tyrone Tracy in the flat, tackle, no gain. Like, that's the stuff you need to see out of that guy. And he was doing it without Terrell Bernard there.
That's right.
That's even more impressive because he's taking on a boatload of responsibility when Terrell Bernard's not on the field.
Well, he is. However, I think Joe Andreessen is really allowing Matt Milano to do his thing. Joe Andreessen
he's on the team.
So we met with Sean McDermott for the radio broadcast for the production meeting before the game the day before. And Joe and Sean McDermott said, I'm a big fan of Joe's. He's just a football player. And that's exactly what he is. Watch Joe Andreessen sometimes. He just diagnoses so quickly. He gets there. He understands the game. He almost had an interception. Joe Andreessen is absolutely a legitimate middle linebacker in this league. I'm not saying he's everyday starter all the time, but he's bumping himself up in my book, and he's certainly good enough to be the backup middle linebacker for the Bills.
Yeah, I think so too. I think right now the clear linebackers on the team are Milano, Bernard, Andreessen, and Dorian Williams. Those are their top 4 guys. The 5th one is the one that I'm interested about, and it goes back to the point you made about getting players back from injury. If Shaq Thompson is back, is he somebody who can carve out a spot as a 5th reliable option at linebacker, or do they stick with one of the younger players that they have? Now, Balin Spector was the name we had talked about. Then he gets injured again, and now he's not, an option really for them to do on the 53-man roster.
Correct.
Is it Ulofoshio?
I don't think Eddie Ulofoshio is making this team.
I don't think so either. Is there anybody else who could be in the mix? The guy they signed from 6 days ago, probably not. That's why I think it's going to be
Thompson. But I tell you, Jimmy Charlo played pretty well.
Yeah, he flipped somebody yesterday.
He did. He was in on a couple plays. Jimmy Charlo played pretty well, but he's not going to make this team, I don't think. But it's a nice guy to have in your back pocket to say, okay, we know what he can do if we have to call on somebody in emergency to sign for even practice squad reps. Maybe he makes the practice squad. Keontae Jenkins, did you not notice? He got into the game very early. Keontae Jenkins was on the field pretty quickly. I think they like Keontae Jenkins a lot. Virginia Tech undrafted player. Doesn't mean he's going to make the team, but it's just you can get clues on what they think about guys.
Virginia Tech, and he wears 49, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, another linebacker from Virginia Tech who wore 49 for the Bills
That's right.
for several years. Yeah, I think that Joe Andreessen though has definitely carved out a spot in the team in like not just a special teams role,
right?
Like getting snaps, which is really really cool to see the progress he has made, especially given the backstory of him being from here, and then just going back to the initial point. This is what you needed to see out of Matt Milano. This is really really promising because he's a player who could change a lot. When the Bills defense has been the most dynamic, it's usually been tied to when Milano is himself. And this is a good sign. And then there's one other guy on the starting defense who I want to give a shout out to that I'm surprised 25 minutes in we haven't mentioned. Joey Bosa.
He was good.
Did you arrow up in your article?
I did. He forced 2 penalties.
Yeah, Joey Bosa was solid. Now, backup. He's going against a backup offensive lineman for the Giants. That said, really looked like he was taking over and winning almost every rep he had. And to see that happen across from Greg Rousseau or on the opposite side of Greg Rousseau is really, really promising because that's what you've needed. You've always needed a legitimate running mate with Greg Rousseau. And ever since Vaughn got injured in 2022, 9 or 10 games into the season, they have not had that. Getting legit pressure on both sides is going to do so much for them because it's just like it helps everybody. If he's winning his battles, now all of a sudden Ed Oliver is going to get a more favorable matchup. If you're bringing in TJ Sanders to run with Ed Oliver on a 3rd and long situation, you really like the juice that he provides you. Obviously, Rousseau is a solid player who I still think could be ascending. Joey Bosa told me after the game it's the first time he's played a preseason game in 6 or 7 years. How crazy is that?
That is pretty amazing. And Matt, I mean, you're right about he put some pressure on. I was really impressed with him against the run a couple times. Go back and watch the game, folks, and just watch Joey Bosa crash down against the run. And what he does, he collapses the tackle. It is impressive. I agree with you right there. A guy that I've said for a while that I was questioning if he could make the team. And at this point, I don't know if he's going to. In fact, I would predict maybe he doesn't. Dane Jackson. And he got beat deep on a ball. And I know Max Harrison is dealing with his injury. I still think the numbers might not wash out for Dane Jackson because if you have Christian Benford, Tre'Davious White, and I think Jamarcus Ingram and Dorian Strong as your outside corners, I don't know where that leaves Dane Jackson right now.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think
unless you keep him over Jamarcus Ingram, but Jamarcus offers so much more flexibility.
Yeah, but how much more? This is interesting. How much more flexibility do you need when you also have players that are going to make the team like Jordan Hancock and Cam Lewis? Like, how many guys do you need to have that great flexibility? Because if you're just going to be basing this off of how good are they as a boundary cornerback, that's what I think the decision should be made off of with this position specifically, because they have other guys who can do a little bit of everything.
The difference is what you just said, though. Those other guys can't play boundary corner. His flexibility includes boundary corner. Cam's does not. Jordan Hancock's does not.
No, I understand that. I guess I'm saying, but Jamarcus Ingram's his best spot is at a boundary corner, but I don't think you need him to do the other things because you have those other guys.
Probably right. He was the dime safety last year, remember?
Yeah.
And he played some nickel last year when Taryn was out. So that's why. But you're right, Jordan Hancock. So I wanted to get into Jordan Hancock. He had the interception. He's playing primarily safety right now, right? I mean, that's where he was on that play. And he was talking yesterday in the locker room about the transition. And I think he was meaning from nickel to safety, where he's playing a little bit more right now. Now, when Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp come back, does that change? Does he go a little bit more to nickel corner? But obviously a nice play by Jordan Hancock. And, oh, by the way, a nice tackle he made on a play a little bit either earlier or later. I can't remember where he came up and he was really physical. And that's what
guy kind of broke out, kind of hit the edge, got to the outside, and he just shot like a cannon and was able to get to an open field tackle. I think that was in the third quarter. That was
he's got to be able to be physical, and I think that they saw that from him. So I like him. How about the other real quickly? The other young defensive players, Deion Walker getting his hands up, batting up pass. That was great. And then TJ Sanders, anything you noticed specifically from him?
Well, yeah, TJ Sanders, briefly mentioned it earlier. Like had a really solid game.
Yeah, I know you had the one player where you talked about.
I wrote in my story, I was, you're only watching these the initial reps, and I've just kind of just taken notes of like, okay, I like that. I like that. I wrote down on several occasions, TJ Sanders kind of like a win. Ooh, I like that play from him. I liked that rep from him. He was immediately causing pressure, and I think that's a good thing. But he also looked capable in run support, which is obviously as a defensive tackle, he's not the biggest guy, but that's what you want to see because it gives you the option to use him in a couple different spots. Because I really do think the Bills in the preseason, even though they didn't game plan, they kind of showed us their hand with what they envision their starting defense to be. And their starting defensive line is going to be Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa, and then the interior is going to be Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. Linebackers, when healthy, are going to be Milano and Terrell Bernard. The corners are going to be I almost said Max Harrison, Trey White and Christian Benford. And the safeties right now are going to be likely Taylor Rapp and Cole
Taron
Bishop.
Johnson at nickel.
And that Taron Johnson and Nick. I feel like I don't even need to give that one.
I get it. I
Yeah,
just want to make
exactly.
sure.
So,
by the way, real quick on him, he was evaluated for concussion, but he was cleared to return.
So when you think about all those names I just said, I think one of the most clear paths for a player behind those guys to get in is TJ Sanders on third down, because I feel like he can come up and play with Ed Oliver, even though he's kind of Ed Oliver's primary backup in their next rotation of guys. I feel like he is going to bring you more juice in passing situations than Daquan Jones is. So that's why I feel like he can come up there. And then the second wave that they used in the game yesterday was the AJ Epinesa and Michael Hoyt kind of bookends at edge. And then their interior guys.
Hoyt had juice.
Yeah, he had some juice, were Ogunjobi and Dwayne Carter. The other guy, but I'm glad you mentioned it. I thought Hoyt had a nice game. Like one play where he hesitated a little bit, and then it turned into the play where Taron made the open field tackle. Maybe he was able to get back to Dart and sack him before that throw even happened, but he waited a split second. Other than that, though, like some really solid moments for a guy who is going to be a rotational piece in week 7 and then so on.
I didn't think the starting offensive line played particularly well.
No,
they did not open up anything. Now, they're not game planning. Totally get it. The Giants actually have a very good defensive front, although not everybody was playing.
Unreal. Abdul Carter looks so sick.
Yeah. I mean, well, Dexter Lawrence didn't play, though, right?
But Brian Burns did, and Abdul Carter did.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So, I mean, who was on the Giants starting defense? Let's see. Burns, Nunez, Roches, Robertson, Harris, Kayvon Thibodeau was out there as well. But listen, I didn't think the O-line played great. I know Deion Dawkins looked like he got beat on a rep that forced Mitch Trubisky, into an early throw. So they have to clean that up, and you would hope they would. Ryan Vandermark gets the start at right tackle in place of Spencer Brown. That's something to watch with Tylen Grable, obviously in concussion protocol still. And then Ty Johnson. I mean, what can you say about this guy? He's just such a gamer. But, Matt, it's the overall picture at running back, going back to James Cook. Just want to touch on what they have back there, because Frank Gore Jr., once again, another preseason game where he looks like he could play in this league, right? But the Bills have Darrington Evans. We know what he's put time in this league. He's had some plays in the NFL. So Ray Davis, we'll touch on him with kicking, but just overall behind James Cook, if it is the worst case scenario, the Bills aren't in the worst case.
No, definitely. But they're not going to keep 4.
Right.
So that brings you to, if you were only going to keep 1 on the practice squad, you'd keep Frank Gore, right?
You'd try to, I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I think so. You want a young guy in the fold, and, second year. Darrington Evans, it's kind of, to me, like just a Ty Johnson
light.
Yes, he's a Ty Johnson copy.
That's right. I'm looking at the box score right now. 5 carries for 21 yards, 4.2 yards a carry for Frank Gore, but 5 catches for 50 yards. So obviously he was kind of all over the place. I mean, their leading rusher yesterday was Ty Johnson, who had 3 attempts, which kind of shows you how little they had success with running the ball, which is totally fine. Whatever, not a big deal. Some of that's the offensive line. Some of that's the guys that they actually have available to them. But yeah, I liked both of their games from Frank Gore Jr. and Darrington Evans, but I've liked every preseason game from Frank Gore Jr. and Darrington Evans over the last couple of years, and nothing has seemed to change. My guess is that both of them end up on the practice squad, but certainly one of them will be there.
Funny anecdote note, I asked Frank Gore Jr. after the game, how quickly will your dad call you or text you after a game? He said, he probably already did, but my dad's actually coaching my 8-year-old brother now in Pop Warner. So he's a little bit more dialed in on that, which was really a funny interaction there with Frank Gore Jr. Ray Davis, the kicker, did a great job. And Sean explained it very well. Look, listen, they've been in situations they've seen other teams. A few years ago, Carolina lost their kicker in pregame warmups. If something like that happens, you have to have a plan. That's why they wanted Ray Davis to kick a field goal. He did. An extra point, excuse me. He did, and it was successful. He said, we won't do that again this preseason, most likely, but you got to make sure you know what you're doing if you're in that situation.
That was the highlight of the day from just, oh, this is entertaining. This is enjoyable. It's the preseason. This is cool to see a running back kicking an extra point and making it. And he said, he had an incredible quote after the game, Ray Davis, about the play. He said, all I was thinking about was how many Instagram followers I'm going to get if I make the kick, because everybody's going to be talking about it, or how many people are going to DM me that you stink and you should never kick again. And he's like, so that's what was going through my head. And then when it went in the air, he was like, holy expletive. I can't believe I just made that. So it was cool to see like how, even though he's a professional athlete, how something so trivial could still be so entertaining and cool for him.
Finally, Matt, from me, unless you have something more after this, let's talk about backup quarterback. Did anything move you either way from what you saw in this game with Mitch Trubisky and Mike White?
Slight edge to Trubisky just because he was going against tougher competition, even though the first couple drives against the better competition of the Giants did not go well. He did eventually move the ball down the field with pretty ease, or with a lot of ease. That doesn't make sense. With a lot of ease on their third drive when they got the Dawson Knox touchdown. A lot of that was because of the spark Ty Johnson gave them. So that changed really the dynamic for that. And then obviously the throw to Shavers was nice at the end of the game. Mike White was the same thing. Started a little bit slow, bounced back. They both threw 13 passes. Trubisky completed 9 of them. Mike White completed 8 of them. So I just think that it's because Trubisky was the leader in the clubhouse to win. He didn't do anything to flip-flop. I still think that it's his job to lose.
I agree with you that Trubisky's probably a little bit ahead. I think the Bills probably, you could see they feel that by him getting the start and playing a full half. I made reference during one of our commercial breaks, probably not on the air, but I'll say it here. Mike White reminds me, because we saw Jameis Winston, he kind of reminds me of Jameis Winston, where it's kind of an all or nothing guy a lot of times.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And he's like Jameis Winston light. Trubisky has that kind of higher floor, but Mike White does have the ability to make some big throws and plays. And he showed that on that throw to KJ Hamler. And I love that. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Bills handle the reps going to Chicago. We don't know what the plan is. Obviously, giving Josh Allen a lot of work on Friday in the joint practice will be the plan, because you can't touch the quarterback. So that's the setting you want to do that. But what happens on Sunday night? And then you're not going to play Josh on the final preseason game. So I think this is going to be really interesting to see how the Bills handle the reps going forward.
Can I ask a dumb question? And I don't want to be cold or mean. This is going back to the bit from the beginning. Why, after the preseason, is there any reason that they need to keep Shane Buechele on their roster or in the practice squad?
I'll give you one reason. It's not a great reason, but I'll tell you. I think that sometimes you just want a guy to make sure you have somebody to run the scout team, not just having the game plan for you to help out. But you could do that with your third quarterback.
That's what I mean.
Like, be the scout team quarterback. I get it.
If Trubisky wins the backup job, Mike White should be the practice squad quarterback, and I don't think they need to, because I don't think Shane Buechele would be getting claimed by another team.
He won't. Sometimes what happens is teams feel they need a different style as another guy in the practice squad to give a different look. Because if you're playing a different kind of quarterback, it's why we've heard of Isaiah McKenzie playing quarterback in scout team, right?
Yeah,
we've heard of other guys. So if you have a guy like Mike White and a guy like Shane Buechele, maybe whatever quarterback you're playing that week, that's the guy you think could mimic him a little bit. If that makes sense.
And there's nothing wrong with
yes. But I agree numbers wise. I'm stretching. It's not a dumb question. I do think it's a legitimate question for spots. Now look, if there's 17 guys in the practice squad now,
yeah,
how much is he really taking a spot from another guy necessarily? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's all valid. It's all fair. If you could keep both of them, then I guess for the sake of just doing it, you keep both of them, because obviously that room is really, really close. And keeping good relationships and good people in the building. Like, he's a very good guy, nice guy. Like, you want to have those types of people in your organization. He's very good friends with Josh. Like, that shouldn't matter, but it does matter, because you want to keep the chemistry high and you want to keep the vibes high. So that's fine. But if they get to a point where they can only keep one of them on the practice squad, I just think it would be crazy to move on from Mike White and then have Bouchel as your like emergency option. And then if something
Right.
happened to Josh, have to be a backup quarterback because it just wouldn't go well. Like it wouldn't go well in an actual game setting.
One thing you have to remember, though, is if a guy like I'll even throw Trubisky here just in case Mike White beats him out. But if a guy like Trubisky or Mike White plays well in the preseason, you move on from him. He just could wind up on another team because they say, hey, we need a backup quarterback who's better than what we have.
Mhm.
So, those are always reasons why you might keep an extra guy around too sometimes because a team goes, wait a minute, like we're going to pluck Mike White from the Bills practice squad or at least offer him a contract. He it wouldn't be automatic or anything.
Yeah.
And then Mike White says, hey, I get a shot at another team. I'll go there. And if you have another guy in the building, you could always bring another guy back. But if you have a guy in the building, it makes sense. You brought up a good point earlier, which I'm interested in how this goes as we get closer to the cut down date in a few weeks from now, which is like how they do the roster gymnastics, right? Who goes on? I think Max Harrison is definitely a candidate for the IR to return that one of those 2 spots they get on cut down day that he can return. I'd be surprised we get there with a guy like Curtis Samuel because at the end of the day, you could also release Tyrell Shavers. He doesn't get claimed. You can put him on a practice squad. You can elevate him. You can do a lot of different things here without costing you the money it would take for a guy like Curtis, for example, or another guy on the roster. So all those things have to start happening here going
Would
forward.
you attach a pick to Curtis Samuel if you had a trade that would work for him? Like, would you trade Curtis Samuel on a 5th to get his money off of the books for like a 7th? And then you open up essentially a spot for Shavers and you clear the money.
I might. I would seriously think about it. I'd really have to see what's the overall picture look like. Like, why are they doing it? Are they doing it to keep a certain guy because they want to make sure they have him on the roster and they don't want to release him or whatever? But yeah, you could really take that money and save it for something else. Even
that's what I mean. Like, it would also give you the flexibility of doing something at the trade deadline or down the road to potentially help your team if you think you're in a position where you're safety addition away or some other random position that they could be looking for. I just think that it gives you a little bit of flexibility. I don't ever want a team to intentionally not have have a bunch of caps.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? Like, you want to spend to the cap because you want to put a competitive team out there, unlike another professional sports team in Buffalo. So you want to make sure that you're weaponizing the cap, but also being smart about it.
Okay, make sure you're following us all week long. We'll be back out at practice later in the week. The Bills, I think the schedule, Matt, if I'm right, is Sunday and Monday. There's a walkthrough on Sunday, and then Monday, no media availability.
Monday,
and then
off day. Tuesday, Wednesday, practice. Thursday, travel to Chicago. Friday, joint practice in Chicago. Saturday, off day. Sunday, preseason game number 2.
Okay, at Sal Sports, that's where you can find me and all these shows, of course, social and on YouTube. Really appreciate everybody coming along. The YouTube channel's been growing, and we're really, really are thankful for that. So thank you so much. Of course, at Matt_Bove, WKBW TV. Make sure you're following them all over the place. They're doing great stuff in digital space as well, on Instagram. Lots of stuff you can follow and find for both of us. We will be back with another episode later this week. In the meantime, Bills next up in Chicago, joint practice on Friday, Bears next Sunday. Matt, you have a great weekend, buddy.
You too. Thank you, sir.